For the final segment of our event, I'm pleased to welcome a panel of some of the most respected and experienced developers. They'll share their insight on lessons learned from the 2020 pandemic, the current market, and how they're working to meet renters' demand in the continued pandemic environment. Calling Aaron back to moderate, please welcome Trisha Van Horn with Related Midwest, Jon Schneider with Fifield Companies, and Will Renner with Hines. This is our view from the trenches.
So I will tell you, first of all, thank you, Trisha, Will, Jon, for joining. When I was putting this panel together, I really wanted it to be people who were living, eating, breathing, sleeping, what it takes to provide the level of service that a Class A renter really expects. And with each of these panelists, I've had the privilege of being in the trenches with them, both before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And I can tell you that these are some of the smartest and most forward-thinking and creative thinkers that we have as owner-operators in this market. So thank you guys for joining today. We have about 25 minutes left in the program, so we want to be super efficient with time, but we'll definitely get into it. I know you guys have a lot to share as well. So let's start with intros if we can for everybody on the call. Trisha, I'll start with you, and then we'll go Trisha, Will, Jon for intros. So go ahead and share a little bit about yourself, the projects you're working on.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Amy, and the whole Luxury Living team. It's so nice to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm Trisha Van Horn. I'm Related Midwest Vice President of Marketing and Communications. I lead corporate and project branding, media relations, leasing and sales strategies, and general marketing across our portfolio. Some of the projects that I work on that you might know are our Related Rentals portfolio, which is 500 Lakeshore Drive, Landmark West Loop, and of course, One Bennett Park. And my development pipeline includes 900 West Randolph, which will be multifamily in Fulton Market, 400 Lakeshore Drive, which is the site of the former Chicago Spire project in Streeterville, and of course the 78, which is a 62-acre site in the South Loop that will be Chicago's next great neighborhood. One fun fact about me is that I have brought more than 10,000 units to market in Chicago. That's in the multifamily space, which is, I'm tired. I'm very tired. It was, it's been a long haul. And then finally, in honor of Women's History Month, I just want to welcome and recognize all the women that are attending this conference today and thank them for being a part of the real estate industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Trisha. Will, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Hines for about 7 years, worked in multifamily before that, but really most of my time at Hines, I've been lucky to spend on that little peninsula called Wolf Point. So, along with the Kennedy family and the rest of our investment group have worked on Wolf Point West, obviously now overseeing Wolf Point East. And then there's that, that little building next to us called Salesforce Tower, Chicago, that just broke ground. But we've, our sort of sandbox is the Midwest. So we also cover other smaller markets ranging from Minneapolis all the way down to Oklahoma City, where we've got a mid-rise project that just broke ground, and more to come. It's been great working in Chicago and supplementing it with some of these smaller secondary markets as well.
Awesome, thank you. Jon, you want to round us out?
Sure. Aaron, thanks for having me. I'm Director of Asset Management for Fifield. I oversee our portfolio here in Chicago and another project in Dallas. We have 2 lease-ups that we brought to the market in addition to our operating portfolio in 2020, one in Logan Square and one in River West called Westerly. Prior to Fifield, I spent nearly 10 years with Gem Realty Capital, a Chicago-based private equity firm focused on our portfolio of multifamily, in addition hospitality. We had some industrial assets and some office deals too. So excited to be here in Fifield in my hometown, working on in the trenches with you, Aaron, on our Chicago portfolio.
Awesome. All right, let's get into it. So it was exactly a year ago. Jon, Will, you probably got phone calls from me. We started talking about what's happening. what were your predictions as we went through the pandemic for commercial real estate at large? I think it's interesting for this audience to hear kind of how we were thinking back in March and what we thought about commercial real estate and specifically multifamily and the buildings. Jon, I'll go ahead and start with you, and then we can go around the group here as well.
Yeah, sure. No, it's interesting, right? I mean, when all the news started coming out and the world was very uncertain, our industry was really focused on rent collection. And, for a couple of months there, I mean, we sort of looked at our portfolio and our clientele and realized, I think we were pretty insulated from that. And what was beyond that, I think, I kind of misjudged in terms of the length of its impact and its overall impact to the multifamily space. But I think what was good is that we were, while I, was pretty bad at prediction, I think we were pretty good at pivoting quickly. And so, while we weren't quite seeing through the crystal ball, I mean, I think we realized very quickly that when the typical tour of being, in person, really we were unable to do it. We refocused on really creating a robust digital asset platform and really focused on getting great footage of our actual in units so that we're able to tour remotely. And I think that has been something that we think is gonna continue for sure. And so we also recognized, as the instability of the market, really the confluence of a lot of folks leaving their leases and going, to either jumping to another building that was offering a better deal or perhaps saving money. The confluence of that and really lack of backfill opportunities created that instability in the market that we think pricing software doesn't quite handle well. So in addition, we really sort of took the reins in our portfolio away from pricing software to allow us to have a little bit more control. And so again, while we weren't great at predicting, I think we did pivot in the appropriate ways that I think benefit our portfolio significantly.
Yep, would absolutely agree. I know on the video front, our friend Mark Zimke, who you guys just heard from, was running around filming, I think, 250 videos within a week, many of which at Logan and Wolf Point East. So Will, why don't you talk about Wolf Point East and kind of where we were at and what your thoughts were at that time and what you expected to happen?
Yeah, I mean, our first move-in was January 1st of 20, and January and February were unbelievable is the word I would use. I felt like, we were going to set a lot of records for Hines, and certainly, March kind of, brought us back to underwriting, which in the scheme of things, we're quite happy about. But I would say the two things that we felt were going to play out was that, number one, we loved the fact that we were local, along with a Fifield and a Related. We've been here for 30 years. We weren't an out-of-town developer that just sort of outsourced everything. We love getting in the weeds. We're sort of a measure 3 times, cut once type firm, which honestly, in super frothy times, we probably miss out on a few opportunities because we're so data-driven and so analytical and relatively conservative. But in times like this, that's exactly what you want to be. And so I don't think we knew exactly how things were going to play out, but I just think, from a big picture perspective, the fact that we were local, the fact that we were detail oriented, and the fact that we love, living in the weeds, we thought was going to, really benefit us. And that's certainly proven to be the case.
Yep, agreed. Tricia, anything else to add there?
Yes, I definitely agree with the sentiments of Will and Jon. I think that what was very important, that very first week that, everything changed, we collaboratively met with all stakeholders, and we said, listen, we came up with a game plan. We had the support from the top down to do everything we needed on the marketing and leasing front. And I think, Jon, you're right. All the assets that we created in this pandemic will live on, right? They're going to benefit the property. So these were great investments overall. And I think one of the things that I do want to bring up, and we were looking at data, of course, but also we were monitoring customer sentiment, right? And the customer journey, because that all changed. And so it was very important to understand how our customers were thinking and how we could best meet them there. So those were a lot of the conversations that we had early on. Some of our predictions were true, some of them were not true. And I think, every week we had an idea that we thought was great, and then a week later we threw it out the window, right? It wasn't going to work. So that was the iteration that we went through, and it was really very collaborative to make sure that we were meeting the market where we could. And I think that was really important to early success.
Yep, all great insights, and absolutely agree. I mean, we took our entire person-to-person sales team and put them in front of a screen and trained them and taught them how to sell in a business-to-business style. And it worked. I think all of us were so pleasantly surprised at how well it actually worked and how many people would rent sight unseen. And everybody did such an amazing job being creative and innovative and collaborative across the industry. And it was really inspiring to see. So, all right, 2020, the beginning, we're done, we're a year later. What surprised you about luxury renters over the last year? Specifically, how they lived, how they reacted, how they worked within your communities. And really there, Tricia, you spoke, we'll start with you. You spoke to their psyche and customer sentiment. So what surprised you last year about the luxury renter?
So a couple of things come to the forefront for us that related. So one that became very clear early on was our renters, the renters coming in were really prioritizing access to nature, open space, and natural amenities actually outside of our property, in addition to, of course, the wonderful outdoor terraces and everything we all have. And I think that was really important for our project that Tristan knows well, 500 Lakeshore Drive, for example, which is, an 8-year-old property, but it has that location on the lakefront. It's next to Bennett Park. It has all of those natural amenities. So we saw a big draw to views and to natural amenities. The second trend I would say that emerged that surprised us because we did see a value-driven market coming out, but we also saw a lot of internal transfers, people that were loyal to the building, loved the service, loved how we were handling, everything in the pandemic, that said, hey, I need more space. I'm like, the 4 walls are closing in on me. I need a 2-bedroom. I need a 3-bedroom. So the number of people that upgraded was a wonderful thing to see. And we were so happy to accommodate them and keep them in the related family.
Yep. Will, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, one of the mantras of our firm has always been flight to quality. And whether it's multifamily, office, even industrial, essentially everything we build new, it sounds a little cliche, but we try and be market plus 1, market plus 2 in some cases. I hadn't been with the firm long enough to see how that plays out in a down market because I joined in 2014. And so, it's hard to argue with the fact that consumers, like quality and will pay up for quality, but to actually see that take place in a soft market was pretty eye-opening to me, and obviously affirms my belief in the thesis. I mean, we've separated Wolf Point East. It's a 700-unit building. The first 500 units are our river collection. The top 200 are what we call the lake collection because of some of the views up there. And it's astounding to see some of the rents and just some of the demand for some of our highest price units in what is otherwise, a soft market. And so yeah, it's totally affirmed my belief in that. And so I can't say I was surprised that that's a fact, but I think I was surprised to see it play out as strongly as it did.
Good point. I always remember we're running $4,500 1-bedrooms in the middle of a pandemic, and it was like, really? Like, people are really still paying this. This is actually happening. So it was awesome to see. Jon, how about you? You've had a good portfolio across the entire city. What did you see? What surprised you?
Yeah, like Will, I mean, it was a tough time. I lost a lot of sleep in bringing 2 brand new assets to market in 2020. And unlike Will, ours are in the neighborhoods. And so, for us, like, we knew that we had a lot of work cut out for us, right? We had lofty expectations, highly amenitized, best in their submarket buildings being brought in the neighborhoods. And I think I was pleasantly surprised with the buzz that continued in those neighborhoods that really benefited our projects. We really found, when compared to, River North, Gold Coast, that really lost a lot of action during that time. The neighborhoods really allowed that, the buzz that remained really allowed those projects to continue to lease. We knew they would do well. We knew we had hard work ahead of us, but we had the right product in the right location. But even through COVID and even through the challenges, the benefit of those neighborhoods and the residents who continue to value what they bring really benefited our projects. So pleasantly surprised with how the neighborhoods performed and the residents that moved there.
Yeah, really great insight. It definitely, over the years, a lot of new luxury developments in the neighborhoods. And I think that the pandemic really, again, still did pretty well in the neighborhoods, all things considered, with everything that's happened, to be at, over 90% leased at Logan. And I think Westerly's doing really well for you now too, is great news. So we're in good shape there. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about amenities, because I think amenities have been a hot topic all year. Recently there's a potential lawsuit that's brewing that, people are looking for rent rebates from amenities. Talk about how you handle the amenities in your building, the common spaces, COVID safety at large, because I think a lot of the renters on this call are interested. And I think in general, how we manage this was really kind of building by building, owner by owner. So interested to hear your perspective. We'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting comparing Wolf Point West to Wolf Point East. I mean, the benefit of Wolf Point East is that we were in lease up. So, we already had a ton of amenity square footage, even for a 700 unit building, but you just didn't have the occupancy you did in a stabilized building. So, the relative stress on that amenity space was less as a result. I think, like everybody in this call, of course we followed the rules, and there were some tough conversations with residents that I understand that, they're paying big rents and they couldn't use the amenities. But I think a lot of this, I mean, Aaron, you hit on this early, and it may sound a little bit cliche, but it really comes down to how well you can institute a sense of community, empathy, and respect in a building. And that's not easy to do in any high-rise building, let alone a 500 unit west or a 700 unit east. It all comes down to the people who are working on your front lines. And, they're either going to be really talented at doing that or they're not. It all comes down to the human being. It's not the website. It's not your technology. It's not, the rent you're charging. And we felt great on day one with the team we have. And I can't imagine an event that would, put focus on that more than last year. So that's what we've been pleased with.
Thank you. Jon, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, two things kind of come to mind. First is we took it seriously. And, we were, I think, we responded very responsibly, excuse me. And like Will said, those resulted in tough conversations. And I think, thankfully we have the best management companies managing our buildings, and some of them, Greystar and Bizzuto are on the call. Really, I think having a great team and recognizing, the top talent that we have has really established those communities, made those conversations a little easier. But we then shifted to, what can we provide to our residents when they don't have access to that stuff? And some of the people on this call will recall me telling them over and over again throughout the 2020, guys, I am not pulling back on our budgets for resident events, for functions. I know it's hard, but let's spend some money. Let's find ways, creative ways to continue that community involvement. If they can't use our stair climber, or they can't, clink cocktails in our demonstration kitchen, at least we can bring those types of things to their home. So it was tough, but we did our best in a challenging environment. Very proud of our teams for continuing to provide best-in-class customer service and a community engagement.
Awesome. Tricia, you want to round us out here?
Sure. I would add to that, we at Related remain flexible and open. And certainly the shifting sentiment of our resident was, of course, amenities, wellness, cleanliness, service, all of those things that we shine at. I would say the key to how we managed amenities during this was resident communication. So we whenever the city had an announcement or the state had an announcement, within hours, we also had an announcement. And sometimes it was just, we are continuing, right? Or sometimes it was, you know, we will now be open at X%. So we really took the, we really tried to over communicate to our residents, you know, from kind of an email standpoint and through the app, and then also those personal relationships. But I think our residents most felt that we were on top of all of the changing news, and we were able to react very quickly and remain flexible.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Communication was so important at that time, and I think we were all in such constant communication. It's such a great thing that like we echo, and I think all of us, you know, at least on this panel, I know having worked with all of you, that we did follow the rules, right? It was, we had to follow the rules. We had to take this very seriously, and we really need to protect our residents and provide that home that I talked about, that Mark, Tristan, this was somebody's home, and it was really important that we maintain that. And I think that there's been some real benefit that's come out, right? Amenities on a reservation system is not always a bad thing. I think there's been some real great advantages to those sorts of things that are coming out of this. And it will be very interesting to watch what continues and what doesn't. Along those same lines, let's talk about future developments and CapEx and how we're managing that. You know, I think that's probably one of the biggest questions right now is how, you know, once we're out of this pandemic, because it is going to happen, we are going to move beyond this. How much is really still going to stay? Like, are people going to go back to the office 5 days a week? Are they really going to continue to work from home? I know none of us know the answers to that, but when we're advising developers, I mean, we're looking at this really closely and making sure that we're advising on the right common space. We're revisiting the unit and what it looks like to live in the apartment and how important that is. Tricia, I don't know if anybody has more potential units in the pipeline than you do right now. Tell us kind of how you're thinking about this and what you're looking at and how you're going about that process.
I appreciate that, Aaron. And you and I have talked about this a lot. And so we've spent a lot of time researching, discussing, and thinking about the future of multifamily residential living post-COVID. And some of the key things that we think are going to stay, and we've talked about co-working, and I think that that's the co-working space. I think that that's an obvious thing that is here to stay at some level, and different ways to do that are really necessary, both indoor and outdoor. But some of the things that Related is looking at for future developments are a little kind of less obvious, but we think very important. So this idea of creating a sense of home, and what does that mean? It means creating an environment like through art and lighting and colors and acoustics and natural materials that provides a soothing, calming palette, that maximizes daylight, that just has that feeling when you walk in. So we think that is what people want now, and we have some data behind that, and we think that is going to resonate in the future, this idea of creating a sense of home. The other thing I will say is bringing the outdoors in is another area that we think is a focus and is here to stay. So this is kind of this renewed connection to the outdoors. This is a visual connection. This is natural light. This is plantings. This is about fresh air and air quality. So those are some of the things that we are looking at that we think will help us stand out in this post-COVID environment, and that will have staying power in the next few years.
Yep. John, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, it's as Tricia mentioned, it's the obvious, focus, but we want to make sure we get the obvious things right. And co-working and the way that folks work in our buildings is important for us, and making sure that, it is in response to the demands of the renter. We've long kind of evaluated our co-working areas and realized that, large communal working areas, be it conference rooms, be it large conference tables, things like that, really weren't conducive even before the pandemic. Were really not really the greatest use of space. And so now, as we think about more folks working in those areas, making sure that they're distanced appropriately for today, but just more private for tomorrow. Because I think that that's important. And some of the fun kind of private things we've tossed around are things like Zoom rooms, with fun backgrounds like this. that, I think folks will really kind of find unique and, put a smile on their face as they have these calls, which are going to be definitely more in the future than they were in the past. And then, as Tricia mentioned, in the unit as well, from a working perspective, when we brought, one of the early on things that we did at both of our lease ups this year was ensuring that, we had a space for a desk and that we modeled it. So it could be something built in, it could be just a natural location for it, but really paying attention to that. And I think, co-working's or remote work in some ways is here to stay. And we certainly want to make sure our buildings are set up for success from that perspective.
Yep. We'll let you finish off. I know we're working through this at Wolf Point West right now and figuring out what we want to refresh there.
Yeah. So that's fun. I mean, we're doing some refreshes at West. I mean, I think everybody knows that COVID has accelerated some trends that were bound to happen anyways, but they've happened in, 12 to 18 months instead of maybe 3 to 5 years. I can remember in 2017, when we were wrapping up design of East, deciding to pivot from, a 750 square foot average at West to a 900 square foot average per unit at East. And I think some people thought we were crazy. We kind of blew off the door with co-working at East, and a few people raised their eyebrows. And then we decided to put the pool inside on the 3rd floor with nano walls and just maximize outdoor landscaping. You can call it, there's certainly a little bit of, we didn't think the market would shift so quickly towards that, but it has. So I would say in the future, I think units are going to get bigger. I think chunk rents are going up. If I had 30 more 1-bed plus dens at East, I would, I'd be the happiest guy in Chicago right now. And so I think a lot of that stuff is here to stay. I also just feel like we could see sort of this differential between some buildings going all out on amenities and then other buildings getting really, really efficient and basically saying, look, I'm not going to have any amenities except a package room and maybe a gym. I think it's this tweener zone that COVID has proved to be not as valuable to the renter. And so I wouldn't be surprised if future product kind of went, a little bit more all or nothing than we've seen in the past.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I would love to have some more 1+ dens at Wolf Point East right now. We'd be moving rents up even more. So speaking of rents going up, we're really towards the end of time here. This is the last question. We still have a pretty decent audience. Rents are going up fast. We just saw the slides. You've seen the data. We've talked about it for the last hour and a half. What's your prediction for the rest of the year? Trisha, we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Well, we talk about this a lot, and we've seen some good results into the year so far, and some changing sentiment from our customers. So my official outlook is rational optimism. That's how I am describing my outlook right now. But I think that yes, by this summer, I think that we'll be seeing some people go back to the office, and really, we'll be looking forward to some of the things that we used to enjoy and potentially take for granted. So we're very optimistic here.
Yeah. Will, next.
Yeah, I think the two biggest changes are people are going to enjoy the weather, whether you're near the lake or the river. It's going mentally, I think it's going to lead to some real stickiness and retention at buildings. And then the second thing is, the person moving from Texas and New York to Chicago is now actually able to move, and they're going to. And some of these downtown buildings, that can be 20-30% of the overall renter base. And I think that has a huge effect on aggregate upward trajectory on rents.
Jon?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that all that being said, I mean, our ability as an industry to recover, which I believe 2021 will be more of a stability year, will really depend on what we do as an industry, or really here in Chicago. I mean, how do we handle 2021? I think our options for our ability to really see meaningful growth is in 2022, but it will largely depend on how strategic we are in 2021, because we will have demand. Folks will be coming back to the city, and how do we handle that demand, and how strategic are we is going to be really important.
Yep, I think you summed it up perfectly there. I think this is about strategic, thoughtful, measured rent growth over the next 3 months, certainly in busy leasing season, reevaluating where we are and really preparing and being ready as an industry for 2022 when those material, rent increases can occur because we're hopefully out of this pandemic. So thank you guys so much, Will, Tricia, Jon. Thank you for joining this panel, for being our partners and supporters of LLCR. It really has been an honor to have you on today. So thank you guys for joining.